In 2009, a carrier pigeon named Winston was tasked with an abnormal request. On a typical day, Winston would be responsible for carrying messages across hundreds of miles. These messages were pretty concise, usually around a paragraph long. On this day, however, Winston was set to carry much more data, and with it, make history. The total size of data that Winston was tasked with on this abnormal request was 4 gigabytes. That's around the size of an HD movie. For comparison, the size of a normal message that Winston would carry would be between 50 and 250 bytes. Therefore, on this trip, Winston was carrying around 10 million times more data. This data was placed on an SD card and strapped to Winston's leg. His goal was to take the data from the town of Pietermaritzburg in South Africa to the coastal town of Durban, about 60 miles away. Now, you're probably thinking, why the effort? Surely it's easier to load the data onto a computer and just send it over the internet. Well, what if I told you it was an emergency, and on the SD card was vital data needed to save someone's life, whilst the internet was down? I'd be lying, of course, but it would make a good story. The real reason was because it was a test to see which was faster. Winston, the carrier pigeon, or the leading internet service provider in South Africa, Telkom. Whoever managed to get the data onto the destination computer first would be crowned the winner. All in all, loading the data onto the SD card, strapping it onto Winston's feathery leg, and uploading it at the destination took around 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 57 seconds. That's a total transfer speed of about 4.2 megabits per second. For reference, that's about 1/5 to 1/6 the median upload speed in 2023. Nothing amazing, but nothing to scoff at either, given this was done with an actual live bird. So, how did Winston's competitor Telkom fare? Well, in that time, they had only managed to transfer 4% of the data to the same destination. This gave the ISP an average speed of about 0.17 megabits per second, or 170 kilobits per second. Pretty embarrassing, to be honest. So the ISP lost, substantially. Now, it's easy to jump to conclusions and blame it on bad infrastructure within South Africa. But Telkom wasn't the only one to be bested by this unconventional speed test. In fact, BT, or British Telecom, the largest ISP in the UK at the time, also had its feathers ruffled in 2010. In this case, it was a small army of birds, with 10 pigeons carrying USB sticks competing against the ISP to upload a 5-minute video, of which was around 300 megabytes in total. By the time the pigeons had landed, the video upload was only 24% complete. Another win for our feathery friends. So why are people using this unconventional speed test against their ISPs? Well, in the case of the UK, it was to highlight issues with internet speeds in rural areas, and was heavily influenced by the test in South Africa. The South African test was actually organised by an IT company based in Durban, called Unlimited IT. But where did the idea to use a carrier pigeon come from? It's not like speed tests didn't exist back in 2009. Well, there's some conflicting reports. One is that an employee who was just one day complaining about the speed of the internet that day claimed a carrier pigeon would be faster. However, I am a little skeptical of this story, and other reports claim it was based on an old internet joke. Before we look into this joke, however, let's take a step back and talk about the noble rock dove, aka the carrier pigeon. Pigeons have often gotten a bad rep. Having lived in London for a period of my life, I've often heard them be referred to as rats of the sky. However, they're also known as the rock dove, which gives us a clue as to why they prefer our concrete cities. This, alongside the fact that there tends to be a lot of food around where humans live, makes cities the perfect habitat for pigeons to call their home. The history of pigeons and humans goes far beyond our concrete jungles, however. In fact, way before the internet even existed. Humans have used pigeons to carry messages throughout history. Some of the earliest references are back in ancient Egypt in 3000 BCE. Pigeons have also performed important tasks, such as carrying messages during times of war and announcing the winners of ancient Olympics. Pigeons are used due to their incredible ability to return home, even when transported hundreds of miles away. In addition to this, if a pigeon knows there's a reliable food source, it will travel hundreds of miles to get there. Using these two abilities, humans have effectively trained pigeons to carry messages between 2 points, thus creating what could be considered the first internet. Of course, these pigeons could easily be intercepted and their messages taken. To counter this, encryption was used in order to secure the content of messages. But that's a story for another time. So where did the inspiration for Winston's epic journey come from? Well, back in 1990, nearly 20 years or 2 carrier pigeon lifetimes before Winston made his journey, a request for comment, or RFC, numbered 1149 was proposed. RFCs are technical documentation used to set the standards of how the internet works. This proposal was called the IP over Avian Carriers Proposal, or IPOAC, in which internet traffic would be carried by birds, such as our Winston. This proposal was issued by the Internet Engineering Task Force on the 1st of April 1990. That date is important. The proposal was obviously a joke. However, as I mentioned in my previous video on the weirdest HTTP status codes, do not give developers bad jokes. However, this rule was once again broken. And like an unguarded sandwich in the middle of a large city, the pigeons were brought in. On the 28th of April 2001, 11 years after the original proposal, the RFC was implemented by the Bergen Linux user group, in which they adopted a prototype called CPIP, which stood for Carrier Pigeon Internet Protocol. You really cannot trust developers, can you? The group sent 9 packets of data over a distance of approximately 3 miles, each one carried by an individual pigeon. After some time, they received their packet responses. Of the 9 requests, they only received 4 ping replies, due to various different reasons. At the end of it, they had a packet loss of around 55%, which isn't great, but it's not terrible. However, the latency was incredibly high, with the response time ranging between 3,000 and 6,000 seconds, roughly 1 to 2 hours. Regardless of the results, the RFC had been successfully implemented. But that wasn't the end of it, and since the original proposal, additional RFCs were created. The first of these was RFC 2549. This proposal was written by the same author of the original RFC, and sought to bring 4 different quality levels of service, ranging from Concorde, First Class, Business Class, and Coach. Additionally, the RFC suggested that heavy users of the protocol could earn frequent flyer miles. In case you haven't realized, developers love to push a joke as far as they possibly can. In addition to this, as the original RFC only supported IPv4, RFC 6214 was released, extending the protocol for IPv6. However, despite these improvements, the protocol does come with some risks. Take for instance back in 2005 when bird flu mania was all the rage. During this time, a Gartner report concluded that the pandemic would likely have little impact on IT systems directly. This report was criticized, humorously, for being uninformed and neglecting the IP over avian carrier protocols. As well as bird flu, other known risks include birds of prey, strong winds, unguarded sandwiches, and general bad weather, thus making IP over AC a little less reliable than our current systems. Despite these risks, however, Winston was notable as a marked improvement to the original implementation. Although, as the RFC described using paper with the pigeons instead of SD cards, Winston and his predecessors were criticized for breaking the original standard. But you know what? I say rules are meant to be broken, and Winston will forever hold a place in my heart as a winner. I want to give a quick shout out to my latest channel member, Spread Prism. A big thank you to both you and my existing channel members for helping to support this channel. Otherwise, a big thank you to everyone else for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.